In today's video, we'll be having a trip back in time to rediscover ancient Egypt. From a chamber under the Great Pyramids of Giza with several large unused wooden ships to the fascinating burial grounds of the forgotten artisans who once built those pyramids. But first, let's take a look at the recently found largest city known to all of Egypt. The lost golden city of Aten. In the past century, archaeological finds haven't been doing so well and haven't really topped anything that had already been discovered. But as more experts make their way to Egypt with better tools and equipment, it was only a matter of time before the next greatest discovery would appear. And also, they didn't disappoint, as recently one of the most significant Egyptian archaeological finds has just been uncovered. The largest known ancient city that was once lost, the Golden City of Aten. This is now considered the second most important discovery since the tomb of Tutankhamun. This newly found city offers a rare glimpse into the life of the ancient Egyptians during the height of their empire and brings a chance for further studies into why the pharaoh had moved cities. Within the city are various vases and pots that contain inscriptions showing how two pharaohs ruled this city at the same time. The original casting molds used for the various amulets and decorations of tombs and temples were also found. A more unusual discovery was a room that had the burial of two cows or bulls, and until today is still being investigated by scientists as they don't have any known cultural or spiritual links to the finding. Another strange burial was that of a human whose knees were wrapped tightly with rope. Now, the discovery team do have a lot of nooks and crannies to look over, but this discovery is no doubt an Egyptian version of Pompeii. The Tombs of Saqqara. Marked by the crumbling pyramids that emerge from the sand like a beast's teeth, the ancient site of Saqqara stands magnificent on the Nile River's western bank. One of the most famous of its kind, the Step Pyramid is a striking landmark for the area, as it is one of the first pyramids ever recorded to have started the tradition of constructing them as royal tombs. And although the surface is littered with dozens of pyramids across 5 miles of sandy land, what lies beneath is a netherworld of treasure. Archaeologist Mohammed Yosef clung on a rope inside a shaft that had been closed off for over 2,000 years, but as he shined his flashlight between the limestone gaps, he was greeted by the eyes of a god. Osiris, to be exact, with a golden face and a plumed crown, and was one out of many carved statues that guarded the hidden chamber inside. Upon entering the chamber, they immediately knew that this was the final resting place of wealthy and privileged people. There were gilded masks, finely carved falcons, and painted scarabs against a golden sun. But this was not as luxurious as it seemed the moment they went in further. There were dozens of expensive coffins that were jammed together and filed roughly on top of each other up until the ceiling, as if it were a warehouse. Each coffin was beautifully painted but was packed around the walls with floors covered in rags and bones. Inside the chamber were also several works of art, portraits, masks, bronze figures, and other precious gems. This discovery opened more questions than answers of the history and culture of Saqqara, and this has attracted visitors from all over the world. The discovery is full of contradictions, but has also introduced ideas in the realms of politics and economics of ancient Egypt. The excavation team dug deeper and found even more connected chambers that led to more coffins stacked together precariously. Some coffins were even buried within the base of the chamber shafts itself, as if the people running the place were running out of space. This megatomb, as most researchers refer to it, is now the largest concentration of coffins ever unearthed in Egypt. The Stone of Apries. A local farmer in the northeastern regions of Egypt was preparing for his long day of crop planting when he accidentally discovered an intricately carved sandstone slab. It was then discovered that this stone slab was installed by the pharaoh Apries over 2,600 years ago. It features a carving of a winged sun disk and an oval that encloses Egyptian hieroglyphs that represent the reigning pharaoh. These kinds of sandstone slabs were used back then by many ancient cities as a symbol of dedication, commemoration, and demarcation. In a statement from the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, they confirmed the authenticity of the find and believe that this slab is connected to a military campaign of the pharaoh who was waging war towards the east of Egypt. This was the same pharaoh who had tried to help King Zedekiah of Judah ward off Babylonian invaders. Upon the fall of Jerusalem, Apries was one of the few pharaohs who opened their arms toward the Jewish refugees. However, experts are unsure if this slab is directly related to that moment in recorded history because they believe that it was related to something like a civil war. Only a few artifacts of his rule have been discovered and reclaimed, but this major discovery can help lead them closer to the truth. The Khufu Boat. Tombs, statues, and treasure might be the go-to discoveries within pyramids, but who would have expected to add a 144-foot ship to the mix? Back over in 1954, under the Great Pyramid of Giza, is one of the oldest known planked vessels from antiquity, the Khufu ship, named in honor of Khufu, the pharaoh who constructed the Great Pyramid. And although this ship is not the oldest in the world, it is the most well-preserved uncovered so far, and was so well built that it survived a trip to the Grand Egyptian Museum. Pharaoh Khufu had included 5 underground chambers near the base of the Great Pyramids, and each one of these held dismantled boats of varying sizes. Researchers believe that this was done so that Khufu would have ships to use in his afterlife. Symbols were carved in the 1,224 pieces of the boat to denote their position and served as a guide on how to reassemble these once Khufu was in his next life. Thanks to this, it helped the modern archaeologists to reassemble it themselves. The largest of the ships was called the Royal Barge and had a unique design where the whole bottom curves up noticeably at either end in a graceful arc. The vessel is made from wooden planking, but its shape is partnered after the shape of early Egyptian papyrus raft boats. Rather than to be paddled or sailed, the design appears for the ship to be towed instead. This 4,600-year-old ship managed to travel from its longtime home under the Great Pyramid using a state-of-the-art venue slated to open outside of Cairo in 2021. Egyptian officials used specific and specially made shock-absorbing metals for the container that carried the ship. Truth be told, it was a long 5-mile journey and the procession was slow to protect the vessel from any damage. The trip took over 10 hours to finish, and the aim of this project was to preserve carefully and closely one of the biggest and oldest organic artifacts in the history of humanity. This is so future generations may be able to witness this marvel themselves. The unfinished Aswan Obelisk. The Aswan Obelisk, the heaviest monument made of a single stone that was ever created by ancient Egyptians, was never finished. It was found abandoned in the quarries of Aswan, but is still one of the most important archaeological finds in Egypt as it provides insight into the ancient stone masonry methods of the past. The obelisks created by the Egyptians have always been subject to great debates among historians. How were these massive pillars carved out from a single block of stone? How were these monuments transported hundreds of miles after they were created? And how were they raised into the upright positions upon arriving at their destination? Well, theories and speculations have been argued by many, and some also love to add a supernatural twist by saying that these were most likely created and transported by extraterrestrial means. The obelisk lies in a bed of granite like a sleeping giant. If it was finished, it would have been measured more than 40 meters high and weighed over 1,200 tons. Studies date this monster to be around 3,500 years old, and it's also believed that the obelisk was commissioned by the then pharaoh at the time, Hatshepsut, which I'm pretty sure I mispronounced. These monuments are typically placed at the entrances of temples and serve as a mark of a kingdom's ingenuity in engineering. But why was this obelisk left abandoned? Archaeologists examined the large pillar and noticed a large crack appearing at the base of the obelisk that might have happened as it was being freed from the bedrock. This obelisk would have been 30% larger than any other previously erected obelisk at the time, so this might have proved to be too much for their capabilities. Today it served as an open-air museum that offers an understanding of the ancient techniques used for massive constructions. Tombs of the Tomb Builders. Whenever we look back at the many spectacular tombs and pyramids created in ancient Egypt, it's often directly attributed to the ruling pharaoh at the time. But it's not the pharaoh who designed and created these magnificent artifacts of the past, but rather it was the tomb builders who served the pharaoh. Around 80% of the population of ancient Egypt is composed of these workmen, and yet we know much more about the few royals and nobles. And so, for centuries, scholars and archaeologists have been drawn to finding more about these artisans who built these wonderful monuments that stood the test of time. In 1990, a tourist was thrown off her horse when the animal stumbled into a mud brick wall. This wall turned out to be an undiscovered tomb hidden amongst the muddy exterior of the land. Inside, though, was a long vaulted chamber with a line of several false doors that were believed to have been used as an area where the dead would commune with the living to receive offerings, like a modern-day cemetery, where the living commune on stone graves. Crudely drawn hieroglyphs were scrawled all over these false doors that contained the names of the tomb owners. Behind this long hall were separate chambers where the dead were believed to have been buried. Although nothing like the intricate stylings of the Great Pyramid tombs, these chambers were incorporated with various pieces of granite, basalt, and diorite, which suggests that the extra or leftover materials in the construction of noble resting places were used in these tombs. However, the tombs were not one singular design of long-winded halls. They were all concealed underground but contained various designs and varieties. Some were in the shape of steeped domes, some were comparable to beehives and structures, and others followed the same common structure as that of pyramids. Although more modest and less grandeur, these tombs were still made by the same skilled craftsmen and artisans at the time. The Golden Mummies of Egypt. The glittering gold mummies of Egypt are probably one of the most iconic and well-known artifacts of the public. The belief that most, if not all, royal coffins were littered with pure gold stemmed from these extraordinary mummies. They were created during the interesting moment in history when Egypt meshed together with Greek and Roman worlds and thus explored newer beliefs about what happens in the afterlife. From an accidental discovery because of a donkey who had lost its way, archaeologists were shocked to find a chamber filled with untouched mummies. There was also treasure scattered inside, showing no proof that anyone had ever stolen from this chamber in the past. This was a chamber of golden mummies from over 2,000 years ago and contained burials of people who were believed to have had not only Egyptian blood, but Greek and Roman blood as well. To be able to become gods like in the afterlife, they did all means necessary to achieve this goal. The gods of Egyptian mythology were described to have bones made of silver and skin made of gold. Their hairs were braided in lapis lazuli, a precious stone with a blue color, and their clothes were decorated with even more precious gems. Therefore, the most iconic coffins known to the public display these amazing fully golden skin, blue hair, and bodies accessorized with precious stones. And even though the men and women buried inside these coffins were already of old age, they still appear to be youthful in their carved image, and this stemmed from the idea that the gods are always young, healthy, and beautiful. Many of these ideologies were common amongst the Greeks and Romans during that time as well. This is also why the hairstyles and clothes also bore similarities to fashion from these neighboring empires. And even though there was this clash of multiculturalism, the empire continued to thrive as people were allowed to practice their own beliefs and follow their own system of life. Now it's time for today's best pick. Today's best pick is an unusually carved pure silver coffin that is unique and distinctive compared to the hundreds of other golden coffins found in history. The Silver Pharaoh. Pharaoh Pausanias I reigned from 1036 to 989 BCE and also has a hard-to-pronounce name for me. He's also one of the most underrated pharaohs of all time. His coffin was made of pure solid silver and was surrounded by treasures that easily rival that of Tutankhamun. The tomb is the only known pharaoh's tomb found that has never been previously entered by tomb raiders. This remarkable discovery was something that should have shaken the world of archaeology at the time, but was cut short because of the outbreak of World War II. The royals of ancient Egypt always surrounded themselves in treasures, and most were fashioned out of gold. Rather than greed, the obsession with gold was for their beliefs in becoming gods in the afterlife, so there is a sort of bit of greed there actually. Similar to how the sun would reappear every morning to shine on the world, they believed that gold gave this same power for man to return to life. Pausanias was the chief priest of the sun god Amun, and he had one of the most sophisticated golden death masks ever discovered. And yet, why was the coffin made from silver rather than gold? At the time where Egypt was experiencing its declining years, silver was considerably rarer than gold, which was abundant in their time. And so to impose a luxurious burial of great wealth, he directed his keepers to carve his coffin in pure silver. But granted, that's not all there is of this unrecognized pharaoh. He was unlike his previous predecessors as he was someone who managed to rule with skill and control. It was during his rule that Egypt saw its last glimpse of a nation beloved by a ruler with ability, imagination, and great expectations. After his death, Egypt was then ruled no longer by pure Egyptians of blood. Rosetta Stone. Language is one of the strongest links of the modern world towards the mysteries of the past. It is through language that we can look back at history and understand it without actually being present. In ancient Egypt, their practice of linguistics should be a marvel of the world not only for its mystery but also for its intricacies and curiosities. Although most Asian countries share the same method of symbolic writing, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs are literally represented by drawings that make it easiest to understand despite not even speaking their language. But even though it is easy to learn through symbols and drawing, it's still not an assurance that whatever the symbol may be is directly related to its actual meaning. And so the discovery of the Rosetta Stone was a groundbreaking time as this helped scholars, adventurers, and archaeologists move closer to understanding and translating the ancient text left behind. Made with a dark-colored granodiorite stone, it is inscribed with the same text but in 3 different scripts: Demotic, Greek, and Egyptian hieroglyphs. The stone was found by French soldiers during Napoleon's invasion of Egypt in 1799. Despite the dangers of war, the soldiers who uncovered the stone knew immediately of its significance and believed that it was something that could be used by the world to come. Today, the Rosetta Stone is one of the single most important artifacts used to uncover scripts of hieroglyphs and better understand the Egyptian ancient civilization. Before we move on, I've got a little challenge for you that'll take 5 seconds to complete. So here's the deal. You just leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, and you will get 25 years of amazing luck. Try it really works. Cleopatra's resting place. When speaking of ancient Egypt, the most iconic figure of both politics, culture, and beauty would all lead back to one person, the last queen of Egypt, Cleopatra. Her name has since been immortalized in the world, and yet she still bears many unsolved mysteries, including the location of her tomb and the true reason of her death. In Tapistis Magna, over 30 miles from Alexandria, a burial site of Egyptian royalty was uncovered, and it dates back to the time of Cleopatra's reign. Researchers are hopeful to discover the secrets of this tomb and perhaps lay to rest the answers people have been begging for about this mythical queen. In many theories written by scholars, Cleopatra was believed to have been buried in Alexandria where she was born, but others do believe that she was buried near the Nile Delta instead next to her ancestors. But because of this new tomb's discovery, they hope to finally put to rest this unending debate. Only a small portion of the tomb has been excavated due to the careful and sensitive nature of the discovery. It's honestly going to take a long while before each of the large tunnels and chambers are successfully excavated and studied, but researchers believe that the world will soon have their next greatest breakthrough that can even dethrone that of Tutankhamun. See you all next time!